You know, if somebody came and if somebody was started to criticize, you know, Abraham Lincoln, George Washington, all that stuff, how might we react? But anyway, he's specifically criticizing the philosophy as opposed to the person himself. Yeah. But he points out that the scholar is going to suffer as a result. So, you know, in the book, this one, 5 years and 11 months, Srila Prabhupada met with Dr. Radhakrishnan. Did you know that?
Mm.
Did you remember that?
Yeah.
I thought I would just read briefly. It's a very short passage. This is sometime around 1973, just about the time this was written. One morning, a few of us went with Prabhupada to the home of Dr. Sarvapalli Radhakrishnan, an elderly Indian scholar and a former president of India who in his commentary on the Bhagavad Gita had written that it was not to the person Krishna to whom we should surrender, but to the unborn, beginningless, eternal, who speaks through Krishna. When he had heard this statement in 1966 at the first Hare Krishna ashram in Manhattan, Prabhupada had called Radhakrishnan an impersonalist, someone who thinks God's form is material, and beyond God is the formless, senseless energy of the Supreme Absolute Truth. In Radhakrishnan's view, God was subordinate to that energy. Impersonal philosophy, according to Prabhupada, was akin to atheism. In Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says that he is the supreme person. His body, mind, and self are spiritual. And everything and everyone is subordinate to him, including his all-pervading effulgent energy, his white light. Krishna asked for surrender to him, the supreme person, not that effulgence. To deny God's form and personality was to deny God his completeness. After a few minutes wait at Dr. Krishna's home, a slight, short, bent old man with a cane in his hand and the other resting on the arm of a nurse entered with shuffling steps. With his nurse's help, he sat near Prabhupada, wordless. Prabhupada leaned forward and gently addressed the doctor, explaining how he was traveling around the world to present the teachings of Bhagavad Gita, and received a good reception. People were hankering for this knowledge, taking it seriously, and becoming devotees of Krishna. Prabhupada quoted Krishna in Bhagavad Gita, I am the source of all material and spiritual worlds. Everything emanates from me. The wise who know this perfectly engage in my devotional service and worship me with all their hearts. Krishna, Prabhupada went on, is a person. Not a person like us, for we are embodied souls. Krishna's form is all spiritual. We could personally relate to him by serving him with love and devotion. As Prabhupada spoke, Dr. Radhakrishnan raised his head and looked at Prabhupada attentively. Then, after just a few minutes, his nurse interrupted. The doctor is tired now and must rest. He thanks you for kindly visiting him. And with the nurse's help, Dr. Radhakrishna stood and shuffled away. There we go. Srila Prabhupada preaching to Dr. Radhakrishnan. And of course, the nurse intervened.
Yeah.
There we go. Interesting. Just thought that was interesting. Comments, questions, observations?
I think the tragedy in India was that people had different expertises, but they decided to go on to other things. He should have stayed with politics. He should have stayed with helping India get past the, British Raj and everything. But instead to explore and get into things that, and to be so arrogant, to be able to say, I think, and not just him, I think a lot of, like Ramsham Prabhu was saying, Jawaharlal Nehru, Radha Krishnan, and I think Bollywood
as well.
directed India in the wrong direction.
Mother Archana Bhakti gave a very nice quote here. Yadyadacharati shrestas tad tadevetaro jana sayat pramanam kurute lokas tad anuvartate. As a leader, he was doing great injustice by following the impersonal philosophy. What to speak of promoting it in the name of Bhagavad Gita? This is condemned. Thank you. Yeah. So because leaders, what they say has a bigger impact on the world, on their constituents, on society. So what they say, it's very, very important that they understand Bhagavad Gita, and that's why one of the reasons Lord Krishna spoke Bhagavad Gita to Arjuna, because he was a leader of society. He and his brothers, Yudhishthir, Bhim, Nakula, Sahadev, Arjuna, they were in a position of kings. And the line of disciplic succession from Vivasvan to Vaivasvata Manu to Ikshvaku, they were being instructed in this science because they were the leaders of society, and they could make sure that it was promulgated within their realms. Thank you. Okay. Yes, you have something. Does that sounded like Kirtan Prabhu?
Yeah, thank you. Interesting statement is made, heavy statement. Life in demonic species awaits the Mayavadi philosophers.
Yes.
Their envies of Krishna. This is amazing, unbelievable. It's this thing. Unless one sees in the spiritual vision, one cannot understand how it is like that. How can I say? But still, it is an unbelievable that they will get into the demonic species after so much of so-called practice of spirituality, with so much of knowledge.
But the beginning point, is that to deny Krishna, and that's the purpose of this whole material world, is to for us to deny the supremacy of the Supreme Lord, the identity of the Supreme Lord. So, good point. Thank you. Text 131.
সর্ববেদ সূত্রে করে কৃষ্ণের অভিধান মুখ্য বৃত্তি ছাড়ি কইল লক্ষণা ব্যাখ্যান.
In all the Vedic sutras and literatures, it is Lord Krishna who is to be understood. But the followers of Shankaracharya have covered the real meaning of the Vedas with indirect explanations. Purport. It is said, Vede Ramayane Chaiva Purane Bharate Tata Adav Ante Cha Madhye Cha Hari Sarvatra Giyate. In the Vedic literature, including the Ramayana, Puranas, and Mahabharata, from the very beginning, Adav, to the end, Antecha, as well as within the middle, Madhyecha, only Hari, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, is explained. Text 132.
শতঃ প্রমাণ বেদ প্রমাণ শিরোমণি লক্ষণা করিলে শতঃ প্রমাণতা হানি.
The self-evident Vedic literatures are the highest evidence of all. But if those if these literatures are interpreted, their self-evident nature is lost. Purport. We quote Vedic evidence to support our statements. But if we interpret it according to our own judgment, the authority of the Vedic literature is rendered imperfect or useless. In other words, by interpreting the Vedic version, one minimizes the value of Vedic evidence. When one quotes from Vedic literature, it is understood that the quotations are authoritative. How can one bring the authority under his own control? This is a case of principiis obsta. What is principiis obsta? I believe that's Latin, isn't it? Latin.
Looks like.
So I looked it up. Apparently it's from some Latin philosophers, and the ideas are the same ideas. You have to nip it in the bud, or you have a slippery slope if you start in one direction. What is that direction? Giving your own interpretation to the Vedic evidence. Interpreting it in one's own way, as opposed to trying to understand what the actual import is, its direct meaning. Lord Caitanya was already speaking about the direct and indirect meaning, and he is emphasizing, which one was he emphasizing that one should take? Understand the Vedas. Direct or indirect?
Direct.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, direct. If you do indirect, that means that you're thinking your ability to interpret is more important or more valuable than the Vedic literature itself. So that way you're undermining the authority of Vedas. So direct is the method. So that's what principiis obsta. If you go down that road, that's a big problem. So you got to stop that right away. We shouldn't go down that road at all. What is that? Interpreting the Vedas according to our own limited understanding. Text 133.
এই মত প্রতিসূত্রে সহজার্থ ছাড়িয়া গৌণার্থ ব্যাখ্যা করে কল্পনা করিয়া।
The Mayavad school, giving up the real, easily understood meaning of Vedic literature, has introduced indirect meanings based on their imaginative powers to prove their philosophy. Purport. Unfortunately, the Shankarite interpretation has covered almost the entire world. Therefore, there's a great need to present the original, easily understood natural import of the Vedic literature. We have therefore begun by presenting Bhagavad Gita as it is, and we propose to present all the Vedic literature in terms of the direct meaning of its words. Text 134.
এই মতে প্রতিসূত্রে করেন দূষণ শুনি চমৎকার হইল সন্ন্যাসীর গণ।
When Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu thus showed for each and every sutra the defects in Shankaracharya's explanations, all the assembled Mayavadi sannyasis were struck with wonder.
সকল সন্ন্যাসী কহে শুনহ শ্রীপাদ তুমি যে খণ্ডিলে অর্থ এ নহে বিবাদ।
All the Mayavadi sannyasis said, Your Holiness, kindly know from us that we have no quarrel with your refutation of these meanings. For you have given a clear understanding of the sutras.
আচার্য কল্পিত অর্থ ইহা সভে জানি সম্প্রদায় অনুরোধে তবু তাহা মানি
We know that all this word jugglery springs from the imagination of Shankaracharya. And yet, because we belong to his sect, we accept it, although it does not satisfy us.
মুখ্যার্থ ব্যাখ্যা করো দেখি তোমার বল মুখ্যার্থ লাগালো প্রভু সূত্র সকল
Now let us see, the Mayavadi sannyasis continued, how well you can describe the sutras in terms of their direct meaning. Hearing this, Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu began his direct explanation of the Vedanta Sutra.
বৃহৎ বস্তু ব্রহ্ম কহি শ্রী ভগবান স্বর বিধৈশ্বর্যপূর্ণ পরতত্ত্ব ধাম
Brahman, who is greater than the greatest, is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. He is full of 6 opulences, and therefore he is the reservoir of ultimate truth and absolute knowledge. He is the reservoir of ultimate truth and absolute knowledge. Purport. In the Srimad Bhagavatam, it is said that the absolute truth is understood in 3 phases of realization: the impersonal Brahman, the localized Paramatma, and ultimately the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The impersonal Brahman and localized Paramatma are expansions of the potency of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is complete in 6 opulences, namely wealth, fame, strength, beauty, knowledge, and renunciation. Since he possesses his 6 opulences, the personality of Godhead is the ultimate truth in absolute knowledge. Just a couple of comments. So the Mayavadi sannyasis, they're saying they don't have any quarrel with Lord Chaitanya's understanding or presentation of the Vedanta Sutra. And what did they say they were following? They were following it the impersonal way. Why did they say that? Are they following it?
Because they belong to that group, Shankaracharya's society. They felt obliged to go along with it, even though it didn't satisfy them.
Yes, very interesting statement, isn't that? Because in the world, people often go along with the ways of the group, of the society they're in, without completely understanding and the details. There was another time, another person that Lord Chaitanya was preaching to that said something very similar. Do you remember that? Anyone?
Was he also an impersonalist?
No, this person was different. I'm just thinking this. Remember when Lord Chaitanya was preaching to Chand Kazi?
Yes.
And Lord Chaitanya, he said that what kind of scripture do you have is that recommends killing your father and your mother?
Yeah.
And so then there was some discussion, because Chand Kazi was actually a scholar, a learned person, especially in Islam, but he also knew something about the Vedas. So he said, I understand, Chand Kazi said, I understand our scriptures are full of misunderstanding and poor logic, but I accept them. Why? Because he's part of that community, right? Remember that?
Yeah, I didn't remember that part.
Yeah, he said that's what he said. He accepts it because it's part of that community. So here the Mayavadi sannyasis are saying something similar here, which is quite interesting. So we accept things in our community or in our upbringing and stuff. That's called, it can be conditioning. So it's a great conditioning which deviates us from understanding the Supreme Lord. So the great fortune is for a person to take birth in the family of devotees of the Lord, because that way their society, their family, their can be directed in the right way from the very beginning. Just like Maharaj, Parikit, and Srila Prabhupada, many like that. So their community will identify with the community of the devotees. They won't be misguided. Does that make sense?
Yes.
And Mother Vindyavali, I'm calling on you to give the Sanskrit for Lord Krishna's Bhagavan 6 opulences, if you could please recite that. You have to unmute.
Aishwaryasya samagrasya.
Yes. Aishwaryasya samagrasya. Strength.
Viryasya yashasya.
Viryasya yashasya.
Then Aishwaryasya samagrasya viryasya yashasha shriya. Then
Shriya.
Jnana.
Jnana. Vairagya.
Yeah. Those things. Aishwaryasya samagrasya viryasya yashasha shriya jnana vairagya yachaiva. Okay. Nice. These are the 6 opulences of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Therefore, he's known as Bhagavan, possessor of these opulences. He has these in full, complete 6 opulences: wealth, fame, strength, beauty, knowledge, and renunciation. Okay. Shall we do one more verse? Well, let's see. Yes.
Sharup ঐশ্বর্যে তার নাহি মায়া গন্ধ সকল বেদের হয় ভগবান সে সম্বন্ধ.
In his original form, the Supreme Personality of Godhead is full of transcendental opulences, which are free from the contamination of the material world. It is to be understood that in all Vedic literature, the Supreme Personality of Godhead is the ultimate goal. This is very important. Lord Caitanya is saying this, and the same thing is said by Lord Krishna in Bhagavad Gita. Who knows the verse?
What was the question, Prabhuji?
Oh, okay. The goal of all Vedic literature is to understand the Supreme Personality of Godhead.
Vedaischa sarvair ahameva vedyah vedantакрит vedantavit eva chaham sarvasya aham hridi sannivishto mattah smritir jnanam apohanam cha vedaischa sarvair ahameva vedyah vedantакрит vedavid eva chaham.
Very good, yes. Sarvasya chaham, I'm in everybody's heart. Sarvasya chaham hridi sannivishto matta, from me, smritir, remembrance, jnana, knowledge, apohanam, forgetfulness, cha, comes from me, come those things. Vedaischa sarvair aham eva vedyo, by all the Vedas, Vedaischa sarva, all Vedas, aham eva ved, I am to be known. Vedanta krit, Vedavit, I am the compiler of the Vedanta, and I know the Veda, as it Vedavit is eva chaham. So same thing. Lord Chaitanya is speaking the same thing as Krishna always. You won't find any difference between Lord Chaitanya's teachings and Lord Krishna's teachings, because Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Sri Krishna Chaitanya, Radha Krishna Nahiyanya is the same. Lord Chaitanya is Radha Krishna combined. Okay. Any other comments, questions, observations, corrections? Okay.
Prabhuji, just I like that one, in the beginning, Prabhu. So I was just correlating, like Guru Bandhana, we do daily. Prabhu karo daya deho more pada chaya. Evejas gusutre bhuvana. So that which we were singing today before I start up the Caitanya Charitamrita. Narottam Das Thakur is saying ha something, it was good.
Haha Prabhu Nanda Sutta, yeah.
Yeah.
So
Nice.
they say that Mother Jumuna said that was Srila Prabhupada's favorite bhajan. Well, actually, she asked Srila Prabhupada, what is your favorite bhajan? This was in London, and he said that one. So, of course, you may have said some other things at other times, but so we could chant that. It's good to learn these things. So, bhajans, prayers, things like that stay in our mind. We can chant them if you're driving your car or doing other things to remember. It's a way of praying to and remembering Krishna throughout the day. Very nice. Thank you. Okay. All glories to Srila Prabhupada, and all glories to Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Vancha kalpatarubhyascha
Patitanam pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo namo namah. Hare
Thank
Krishna.
you, Visnugada Prabhu. Hare
Hare
Krishna.
Krishna.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Prabhu. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Prabhuji. Hare Krishna.